Lyanna Ashworth was about to discover that being the smartest woman in the room could be the most dangerous thing of all, especially when that room belonged to the man who was supposed to marry her. The iron-reinforced wheels of her father's carriage scraped against the cobblestones of Blackthorn Castle with a sound like grinding teeth, each rotation carrying her closer to a fate that would judge her mind as harshly as her breeding. Massive wooden gates groaned open, revealing a courtyard thick with afternoon shadows and the scent of horse sweat. Dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight as her carriage lurched to a halt before the great stone steps. Through the small window, she glimpsed clusters of servants and courtiers gathered like vultures, their faces already arranged in expressions of polite curiosity that would soon curdle into something else entirely. Lyanna smoothed her travelling dress, deep blue wool that complemented her dark hair, and checked that her leather satchel remained secure at her side. Inside lay her most precious possessions, books her father had foolishly allowed her to read, maps she'd studied until she could navigate by memory, and correspondence written in 3 languages. She had no idea these treasures would soon become evidence of her unsuitability. The carriage door swung open, and she stepped onto the mounting block with practiced grace. Her boots, sturdy leather meant for walking, not decoration, touched the ancient stones as whispers began to slither through the crowd like smoke. Not the awed murmurs she'd expected, but something cooler, more calculating. "That's her." The voice drifted from somewhere behind a pillar. "Looks ordinary enough. Wait until she opens her mouth." Lord Edmund Blackthorn stood at the centre of the gathering, a man built like his castle, broad, imposing, and unyielding. His brown hair caught the light as he descended the steps, but his eyes remained shadowed. At 32, he commanded respect through sheer presence, his dark doublet embroidered with silver thread that spoke of wealth without ostentation. He stopped 3 paces away, close enough for courtesy, far enough to maintain distance. "Lady Lyanna." His voice carried the weight of stone walls and winter mornings. "Lord Edmund." She inclined her head precisely the correct degree for greeting a peer, not too deep, not too shallow. Her father had drilled such things into her, alongside Latin conjugations and astronomical calculations. His gaze swept over her, cataloguing details with the efficiency of a merchant examining goods. She felt herself being measured against some invisible standard and sensed, with growing unease, that she was already falling short. "You've travelled far." The words should have been welcoming. Instead, they sounded like an accusation. "Indeed, my lord, though I find the journey educational. Your lands are remarkably well positioned for both trade routes and defensive advantage." The silence that followed her observation stretched like a bowstring drawn too tight. The solar's warmth did nothing to thaw the chill that had settled over the courtyard. Edmund led her through corridors lined with tapestries depicting hunting scenes and battle victories, past servants who pressed themselves against stone walls and watched her passage with expressions she couldn't quite read. Not curiosity now, but something closer to wariness. The chamber itself spoke of power held firmly in check. Oak panels polished to a deep gleam, maps spread across a table carved from a single massive tree, and chairs arranged with military precision. 3 men waited inside: Sir Marcus, the castle's greying steward; Brother Thomas, a monk whose ink-stained fingers marked him as the keep's record-keeper; and a younger man whose bearing suggested military training. "Please, be seated." Edmund gestured to a chair positioned to face the others, not beside him as an equal, but across from them as a subject for examination. Lyanna settled herself with careful composure, hands folded in her lap. The men exchanged glances. She pretended not to notice. "Lady Lyanna," Edmund began, his tone formal as a court proceeding, "it's customary for us to discuss the practical matters of our arrangement." The management of household affairs, the extent of your domestic knowledge. She nodded, understanding the script she was meant to follow. Of course, my lord. Though I confess I'm curious about your current difficulties with the grain merchants. From Millhaven, surely the river tolls could be restructured to benefit both parties. The silence stretched like a blade being drawn slowly from its sheath. Sir Marcus cleared his throat. The lady seems well informed about local commerce. My father believes knowledge of one's land's essential for proper stewardship, she replied, missing the warning in the steward's tone. Speaking of which, Brother Thomas, I noticed the fascinating astronomical calculations in your scriptorium. The marginalia in your copy of Ptolemy's geography suggests someone here has been tracking celestial movements with remarkable precision. The monk's face went pale. You read Latin, my lady? Among other languages. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. I find Ptolemy's theories on cartography particularly intriguing, though I suspect his calculations regarding the Indies may be fundamentally flawed. Edmund's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And what would a lady know of such matters? The question carried an edge sharp enough to cut. Lyanna felt the first stirring of real unease, like standing on ice that had begun to crack beneath her feet. Only what study teaches, my lord. Surely understanding the world beyond our borders serves any lord's interests. She turned to the military man. Your positioning of watchtowers along the eastern approach shows excellent strategic thinking, though I wonder if the gap near Crow's Ridge might prove vulnerable should raiders approach from... Enough! Edmund's voice cut through her words, like a sword through silk. The room fell dead silent. Edmund dismissed the others with a gesture sharp as a blade. The advisors filed out in uncomfortable silence, leaving Lyanna alone with a man whose hospitality had curdled into something far more dangerous. The solar's warmth seemed to drain away with their departure, replaced by a chill that had nothing to do with stone walls. Walk with me. His words held no courtesy now, only command. She rose without protest, following him through a narrow passage that led to his private chambers. Here, away from watching eyes, tapestries gave way to practical furnishings, a desk scarred by years of use, shelves lined with ledgers, and a single window that overlooked the training yard where men practiced with wooden swords. Edmund moved to that window, hands clasped behind his back. In 32 years, I have built something here. Order, stability, respect. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. I need a wife who understands her place in that structure. Lyanna's heart beat steadily against her ribs, but she kept her breathing even. And what place would that be, my lord? Silent, supportive, content to manage household matters and bear children. He turned to face her, his expression carved from the same stone as his castle walls. You are none of these things. The words should have stung. Instead, they settled over her like armor. I see. Do you? His eyes searched her face for signs of the tears he expected, the pleading that should follow such a pronouncement. You speak like a man. Think like a man. Question authority as if you possess the right to do so. Such tendencies are unnatural in a woman. Lyanna felt something crystallize inside her chest, cold and sharp and unbreakable. Unnatural. The arrangement is dissolved. You may remain as my guest until transport can be arranged for your return. He moved to his desk, already reaching for parchment as if she had ceased to exist. I'll send word to your father explaining the incompatibility. She watched him dip his quill in ink with the same detached precision he'd used to dissect her character. No anger colored his movements, no regret shadowed his features. She was simply a problem to be solved, a mistake to be corrected. I understand, my lord. Her composure seemed to unsettle him more than tears would have. The quill paused above the parchment. A servant will escort you to the East Tower. You'll find the quarters adequate. He resumed writing without looking. Up. Supper will be brought to your room. Lyanna inclined her head with the same precise courtesy she'd shown in the courtyard. You are most generous. Minutes later, she followed a tight-lipped serving woman up a winding stair to chambers that spoke eloquently of her new status. Clean but sparse, with a narrow window and a door that would undoubtedly be watched. As the servant's footsteps faded, Lyanna sat on the edge of the simple bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. No husband, no protection, no clear path home. But she did not weep. Sleep proved as elusive as Edmund's approval. Lyanna lay on the narrow bed listening to the castle settle around her. Timber creaking, wind whistling through arrow slits, the distant sound of guards changing watch. When the moon reached its zenith, she gave up the pretense of rest and wrapped her cloak around her shoulders. The corridor outside her chamber stretched into darkness, broken only by the occasional torch bracket. Her soft-soled shoes made no sound. On the stone floor, as she made her way toward what she hoped might be a library or scriptorium, if she was to be imprisoned here, she would at least seek some occupation for her mind. She had descended 2 flights of stairs when voices drifted. Up from below, low, urgent, and definitely not meant for innocent ears. Too dangerous to leave alive. Lyanna pressed herself against the cold stone wall, heart hammering. She's already seen too much, continued a voice she recognized as Sir Marcus, asking questions about the grain routes, the eastern defenses. What if she's not just curious? What if someone sent her? Lord Edmund dissolved the arrangement, came another voice. She'll be gone within days. And then what? She returns to her father with knowledge of our weaknesses, our plans. The steward's tone carried deadly certainty. There are easier solutions. Fear shot through her like ice water. They weren't speaking of some distant threat. They meant her. Ravencrest would never allow it. The name fell into the conversation like a stone into still water, creating ripples of unease even among these hardened men. The Shadow Knight protects no one but himself, Marcus replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Besides, he's rarely in the castle anymore. Lyanna had heard whispers of Sir Gareth Ravencrest, the knight who served no lord completely, whose sword had ended more lives than plague. Men crossed themselves when speaking his name, claimed he could move through darkness like smoke itself. The voices began moving away, but their words followed her like hunting hounds. She needed to return to her chamber, to think, to plan. She turned back toward the stairs. A figure materialized from the shadows, as if the darkness itself had taken human form. Tall, lean, draped in black leather that seemed to absorb what little light the torches provided. His face remained hidden, but she caught the glint of steel at his hip and the controlled way he held himself, like a blade in its sheath. "Dangerous place to wander alone, my lady." His voice carried the rough edge of a man more familiar with battlefield commands than courtly pleasantries. Lyanna's throat felt desert dry, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "Sir Gareth." A pause, then what might have been approval in his tone. "You know me. By reputation. Which should terrify you." He stepped closer, and she caught a glimpse of pale eyes that seemed to see everything. "Yet you stand your ground. Running rarely solves anything." Something shifted in the air between them, recognition perhaps, or the acknowledgement that they were both creatures existing outside the normal order of things. "No," he agreed quietly. "It doesn't." Dawn brought no comfort, only the certainty that last night's conversation had changed everything. Lyanna found herself in the castle's library, a cramped chamber tucked beneath the chapel, where dust motes danced in coloured light from stained glass windows. Brother Thomas had abandoned his copying work early, leaving her alone among the precious volumes. She was examining a treatise on trade routes when footsteps announced an arrival. Not the shuffle of servants or the purposeful stride of courtiers, but something quieter, more controlled. "You read quickly." Gareth emerged from behind, a pillar, moving with that same unnatural silence she'd witnessed in the corridor. Knowledge is meant to be consumed, not merely admired. She didn't look up from the manuscript, though every nerve in her body had snapped to attention. Though I suspect you didn't come here to discuss scholarship. No. He settled into the chair across from her, close enough that she could see the collection of small scars along his knuckles. I came to discuss your survival. The words hung between them like an unsheathed blade. Lyanna carefully closed the book and met his gaze. In daylight, his eyes proved to be an unsettling pale green, the color of winter seas. The men you overheard last night, he continued, they're not wrong to fear you. Your questions yesterday revealed more than you realize. About grain routes and defensive positions. About the extent of your knowledge. His voice carried no judgment, only statement of fact. You identified weaknesses in their eastern defenses that took their military advisors months to recognize. You questioned trade arrangements that are currently under private negotiation. You read documents written in languages most men here cannot even identify. Understanding crept over her like frost spreading across glass. They think I'm a spy. Worse, they think you're capable of being one. Gareth leaned forward slightly. Your father arranged this marriage to forge an alliance. But what if you returned home with intimate knowledge of Blackthorn's military capabilities, trade secrets, and political vulnerabilities? The implications struck her like physical blows. Her innocent curiosity, her natural inclination to learn and understand, had painted her as a potential weapon in the wrong hands. So they mean to ensure I cannot return home at all. Sir Marcus has already suggested as much to others who would listen. An accident during your journey. Bandits on the road. Such things happen to unprotected travelers. The manuscript before, her blurred as fear crystallized into something sharper. And why do you tell me this? Gareth was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. Finally, because intelligent women are rare enough without letting fools eliminate them for convenience. A sound in the corridor made them both freeze, voices approaching, growing louder. Gareth rose with fluid grace, his hand instinctively moving toward his sword hilt. There's a passage behind the altar, he murmured, if you need to disappear. And quickly, the voices grew closer, male, urgent, and unfortunately familiar. The passage behind the altar led deeper than Lyanna had expected, spiraling down through narrow stone steps into chambers that predated the castle above. Here, in a vault lit by oil lamps that Gareth produced from hidden alcoves, they could speak without fear of listening ears. "How long have you known about this place?" she asked, running her fingers along walls carved with symbols that seemed far older than Christian crosses. "Long enough to appreciate its usefulness." He spread a piece of parchment across a stone table, a rough map of the castle and surrounding lands. "The question is whether you're prepared to use it." Lyanna studied the markings he'd made. "You're planning my escape. I'm planning our survival." His correction carried weight she hadn't expected. "If they move against you, they'll need to ensure no witnesses remain. I've become inconvenient to certain interests lately." She looked up sharply. "What aren't you telling me?" Gareth's expression remained unreadable, but something shifted in his posture. "The grain routes you questioned, they're not legitimate trade agreements. Marcus has been selling information to raiders when to strike supply convoys, which roads carry the most valuable cargo. Your observations yesterday came dangerously close to exposing a very profitable arrangement." The implications hit her like ice water. The attacks on merchant caravans, coordinated, planned, and extremely lucrative for those involved. He pointed to marks on the map indicating patrol routes. "I've been investigating for months. Your arrival and your questions forced their timeline. They can't simply remove a lord's daughter without consequences. They can if she dies tragically, while fleeing in the night." His pale eyes met hers. Overcome with shame at her rejection, she attempted to return home alone. Bandits found her first. Footsteps echoed down the passage, light, quick, purposeful. Gareth's hand moved to his. Knife? But he relaxed as a boy of perhaps 12 emerged from the shadows. "Sir Gareth!" The stable lad's voice cracked with nervousness. "They're asking questions about the horses. Who might have access? How many could travel undetected?" "When?" Gareth asked. "Tonight, sir, after the evening meal." Lyanna felt her heart sink. So soon. Desperation makes men hasty. Gareth rolled the map carefully. "We leave before they do. Tom," he addressed the boy, "ready 2 horses, the black gelding and the bay mare, quiet as you can manage." The boy nodded and disappeared back into the passage. "I should gather my things," Lyanna said. "Nothing that marks you as noble. Plain cloak, sturdy shoes, whatever coin you carry." Gareth extinguished one of the lamps. "We travel as common folk, seeking work in the next village." She nodded, though uncertainty clawed at her chest. "And after that?" "After that, we discover who else is involved in this arrangement. Because if Marcus is coordinating with raiders, someone with more authority, then a castle steward is giving orders." The remaining lamplight flickered across his scarred features. "This goes higher than we thought." Their plans changed with the sound of screaming. Lyanna was returning from the hidden chamber when commotion erupted in the castle's lower bailey. Men shouted orders, horses stamped and snorted, and beneath it all came the awful sound of someone in agony. She reached the courtyard as guards carried a bloodied figure through the gates. "Training accident," one of them panted to the gathering crowd. "Sword slipped during practice. Cut him deep." The injured man, barely more than a boy, writhed on the makeshift stretcher, blood seeping through the cloth pressed against his thigh. Brother Thomas hurried forward with his meager supplies, but his hands shook as he examined the wound. "Too deep," the monk muttered. "I haven't the skill." Lyanna found herself moving before conscious thought intervened. "Let me see." The crowd parted, surprise evident on every face. Brother Thomas looked up with desperate relief. "Lady Lyanna, if you have any knowledge of healing—" She knelt beside the stretcher, ignoring the whispers that rippled outward like stones dropped in still water. The wound was indeed deep, but not mortal, if treated correctly. "I need clean cloth, boiled water, and something to stitch with." "You know medicine?" Sir Marcus had appeared at the edge of the crowd, his voice carrying dangerous interest. "My mother insisted I learn basic healing." The lie came smoothly as she worked, for managing household injuries. She could feel eyes watching her every movement as she cleaned the wound with steady hands, applied pressure to stem the bleeding, then began the delicate work of stitching torn flesh. The boy had mercifully fainted, making her task easier. "Remarkable technique," Brother Thomas observed quietly. "Where did you learn such precision?" "Practice." Another half-truth. She'd spent countless hours studying anatomical texts, but that knowledge was too dangerous to admit here. When she finished, the boy's breathing had steadied and color was returning to his face. Murmurs of approval rose from the watching crowd, a sound that made her stomach clench with foreboding. "Most impressive," came Lord Edmund's voice from behind her. She hadn't heard him arrive, but now he stood watching with an expression she couldn't read. "Perhaps I was hasty. In my earlier assessment, the words should have brought relief. Instead, they sent ice through her veins." Beside her, she caught Gareth's almost imperceptible shake of the head, a warning. "The boy will live," she said simply, rising to wash blood from her hands. "Indeed, and thanks to skills that could prove valuable to our community." Edmund's tone carried new calculation. "I believe we should discuss your future here more thoroughly. Tonight, at the feast, as my honored guest." It wasn't a request. As the crowd dispersed, Lyanna met Gareth's gaze across the courtyard. His expression was grim. Their window for escape had just slammed shut. The feast lasted exactly long enough for Lyanna to realize Edmund's renewed interest was a trap more elegant than any dungeon. He seated her at his right hand, spoke of her unexpected talents, and watched her with eyes that catalogued every word, every gesture, every breath. When the wine had loosened tongues and attention had shifted to entertainment, she excused herself. With a murmured complaint of fatigue, no one followed immediately, the perfect behavior of a guest content with her elevated status. She reached the stables as church bells tolled midnight. Gareth waited with 2 horses saddled, their hooves wrapped in cloth to muffle sound. He helped her mount without words, then led them through the postern gate he'd somehow left unguarded. They rode in silence for an hour before the pursuit began. The sound reached them as they descended into the river valley, hoofbeats multiplying. Like approaching thunder, torches bobbing through the darkness behind them. Too many riders moving too fast, with too much certainty of their quarry's direction. They knew, Gareth muttered, urging his mount faster. Someone told them our route. Lyanna's mind raced as they plunged deeper into forest that seemed to close around them like a living thing. "The old Roman road," she called over the wind. 3 miles north, it leads to abandoned quarries. How do you know that? The maps. In Edmund's Solar. I memorized them. He shot her a look of grudging admiration before wheeling his horse toward barely visible deer tracks. Behind them, the pursuit sounds grew closer. They abandoned the horses at a rocky outcropping where hoofprints would disappear into stone. Gareth led her up treacherous slopes to a cave mouth hidden behind hanging vines, a place that spoke of careful preparation and intimate knowledge of this terrain. Inside, darkness swallowed them completely until he lit a small oil lamp that revealed supplies cached against the walls: food, water, weapons, blankets. This was no random refuge. "You've used this before," she observed, catching her breath. "Many times." He moved to the cave mouth, listening. "When I was younger, less careful about which lords I served." What changed? The question hung between them as distant shouts echoed through the forest. Their pursuers had found the horses. "I served a lord once who used my skills to eliminate inconvenient people, merchants who asked too many questions, knights who served the wrong cause." His voice carried old pain. "I told myself it was justice, order, until I was ordered to kill a woman whose only crime was refusing to let her village starve." Lyanna felt something shift in her understanding of him. "And I refused. Became inconvenient myself." He extinguished the lamp as torchlight flickered past the cave mouth. "Been running from that choice ever since." The sounds outside grew closer. Voices, metal scraping stone, the systematic search of trained hunters. "Until now," she whispered. His hand found hers in the darkness. "Until now." A torch beam swept across the cave entrance. They reached the abbey ruins as dawn painted the sky the color of old blood. The sanctuary lay hidden in a valley that maps had forgotten, its broken walls crowned with ivy and morning mist. What remained of the chapel stood open to sky, but the attached buildings showed signs of recent habitation: smoke curling from a chimney, herbs hanging to dry beneath overhanging eaves. "Sister Meredith," Gareth called softly to the doorway of what had once been the scriptorium. A woman emerged, 60 years perhaps, with silver hair braided simply, and hands that spoke of a lifetime's work with plants and healing. Her eyes, sharp, as winter starlight took in their travel-stained clothes and exhausted faces with a single glance. "The Shadow Knight brings a lady to my door," she observed without surprise, "and both of you running from something that has teeth." "They're a day behind us," Gareth replied. "Maybe less." "Then come. Rest while you can." She gestured them inside, to a chamber warmed by a fire that smelled of dried lavender and sage. "I'll keep watch." For the first time in days, Lyanna felt her shoulders truly relax. She sank onto a bench beside the fire while Sister Meredith pressed warm bread and honey tea into her hands. "You heal," the older woman said, studying Lyanna's face. "I can see it in how you hold yourself, how your eyes catalogue injuries and remedies, without conscious thought. Some knowledge," Lyanna admitted carefully, "knowledge that frightens men because it gives women power they prefer to keep for themselves." Meredith's voice carried the weight of years spent defying such expectations. "I was a court physician once, before they decided my gender made my learning dangerous." Gareth looked up from checking his weapons. "How long ago?" 20 years. About the time young knights began questioning the orders they were given. Her gaze found his. "Tell me, do you still wake at night wondering which deaths were necessary and which were merely convenient?" The question hit like a physical blow. Gareth's hands stilled on his sword hilt. "Every night," he admitted quietly. "Good. It means your soul isn't entirely lost." Meredith moved to the window, scanning the forest beyond. "The woman who refused to let her village starve, did you know her name?" "Elena." The word came out rough, torn from some deep place he'd kept sealed. "She had 3 children." Lyanna watched understanding pass between them. Healer recognizing warrior, both carrying the weight of choices that had defined and damned them in equal measure. "And now?" Meredith asked. Gareth's eyes found Lyanna's across the firelight. "Now I'm trying to save someone instead of destroying them." Outside, a bird call that sounded almost human echoed across the valley. Sister Meredith's expression hardened. "They've found us." The mountain pass offered no mercy, just wind-carved stone and a bridge spanning a chasm that swallowed sound like a hungry throat. Sister Meredith had directed them here through paths known only to those who lived outside the law, but Edmund's men had followed faster than anyone anticipated. 8 riders, Gareth observed from behind a boulder, his voice carrying the calm of a man who'd faced worse odds. "Edmund leads them personally." Lyanna pressed herself against the rock face, studying the narrow bridge that spanned the ravine. Ancient Roman engineering, built to last centuries, but never intended for armed conflict. The bridge can't support more than 3 horses at once. The support stones are showing stress fractures along the eastern side. "You want to collapse it? I want to control it." Her mind raced through calculations of weight, leverage, and timing. "If we can force them onto the bridge at the right moment?" Hoofbeats echoed off stone walls as their pursuers entered the pass. Edmund's voice carried clearly in the thin air. "The bridge is the only crossing for 20 miles. They're trapped." Gareth checked his arrows, 6 remaining. "Not enough for 8 men." "What do you need?" "Get them onto the bridge. All of them, if possible." Lyanna gathered loose stones, testing their weight. "When I give the signal, target the lead support on the eastern side." "That's not a plan. That's suicide. It's physics." She met his gaze steady, despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Trust me." Edmund appeared at the pass entrance, magnificent in his arrogance, steel gleaming in the afternoon sun. Behind him rode Sir Marcus and 6 men-at-arms, their faces grim with purpose. "Lady Lyanna," Edmund's voice echoed off canyon walls, "you've led us quite a chase. But it ends here." She stepped into view at the bridge's center, hands empty but chin raised. "Does it, my lord? Come willingly, and Sir Gareth may yet live. Continue this foolishness, and I'll hang his body from my castle walls as a warning to others." Such generous terms. She backed slowly across the bridge, measuring distances. "Tell me, Edmund, who benefits most from the grain shortages? You or the raiders you've been feeding information?" His face darkened. "Enough lies." "Lies?" She reached the bridge's center point, directly over the support stones she'd identified. "Ask Sir Marcus about his private correspondence, about silver changing hands for convoy schedules." Edmund's gaze snapped to his steward. Marcus paled, but urged his horse forward. "She seeks to divide us, my lord. Desperate words from a desperate woman." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Edmund's men exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their faces. "Prove it," Edmund snarled, spurring his horse onto the bridge. One by one his men followed. Lyanna felt the ancient stones vibrate beneath her feet as 8 horses crowded. Onto engineering never meant to bear such weight. She caught Gareth's eye and nodded. His arrow flew true. The bridge collapsed with a sound like the world breaking apart. Stone grinding against stone, timber snapping, and beneath it all, the terrible silence that followed screaming. When the dust settled, half the ancient span lay scattered across the ravine floor, taking 3 men and their horses into the depths below. Lyanna found herself on solid ground, pressed against the canyon wall where Gareth had tackled her at the last moment. Her ears rang and blood seeped from cuts on her hands, but she was alive. More than she could say for Sir Marcus, whose final expression of shock would haunt her dreams. Edmund had survived, thrown clear when his horse reared at the bridge's collapse. He sat now against a boulder, his left arm hanging at an unnatural angle, staring at the gap where his pursuit had ended. 2 of his men tended wounds, while the other survivors gathered what remained of their gear. "It's over," Gareth said, helping her to her feet. His voice carried the hollow exhaustion of a man who'd seen too many endings. "Is it?" Lyanna looked across the chasm at Edmund's broken force. "He's still a lord. I'm still a woman who knows too much." Edmund's voice carried across the gap, cracked but defiant. "This changes nothing, Lady Lyanna. You've only delayed the inevitable." "Have I?" She stepped to the edge of the broken bridge, her voice rising to reach him. "Your men heard what I said about Marcus, about the grain routes and the raiders. How? Long before word spreads? How long before someone investigates those silver payments?" The surviving soldiers exchanged glances, seeds of doubt planted at just the right moment. "You killed good men today," Edmund snarled. "I stopped you from killing an innocent woman." Gareth's hand rested on his sword hilt, a reminder that this confrontation could resume at any moment. The choice was yours. For a long moment, the only sound was wind whistling through the canyon. Then Edmund struggled to his feet, favoring his injured arm. "This isn't finished." "Yes," Lyanna replied quietly. "It is." They descended toward friendly territory as evening painted the mountains purple and gold. The nearest village lay a day's travel through forest paths Sister Meredith had mapped for them, a place where questions weren't asked and coin spoke louder than titles. "What now?" Gareth asked as they made camp beside a mountain stream. Lyanna considered the question while washing blood from her hands in the icy water. Behind them lay a life she couldn't return to. Ahead stretched uncertainty vast as the wilderness itself. "Now we decide who we want to be," she said, "instead of letting others decide for us." He nodded slowly, understanding passing between them like a shared secret. For the first time in days, the future felt like possibility rather than trap. 3. Years had passed since the bridge collapsed and took Lord Edmund's certainty with it. The village of Millhaven had grown in that time. New houses sprouting along the river bend, fields expanding up the hillsides, and a prosperity that came not from raiding supply routes, but from honest trade and careful planning. Lyanna stood in the doorway of what the villagers called the Healing House, watching Gareth demonstrate sword techniques to a group of young men in the practice yard. His movements remained deadly precise, but his purpose had transformed. These boys learned to defend their community, not conquer others. "Lady Lyanna." A voice drew her attention to the road, where a merchant's wagon had stopped before their house. The driver, a weathered man with intelligent eyes, climbed down with careful respect. I'm told you're the one to see about trade negotiations with the Eastern settlements. She smiled at the title. Earned rather than inherited, respected rather than feared. Indeed. What brings you to our valley? As he explained his proposal for establishing a regular wool trade, she listened with the same intensity she'd once brought to forbidden books. But here her knowledge was welcomed. Her questions about routes and seasons and profit margins were met with gratitude rather than suspicion. Your reputation precedes you, the merchant concluded. They say you can chart a trade route that benefits everyone involved. We prefer partnerships to conquest, she replied, the plural deliberate. Everything they'd built here had been accomplished together, Gareth's strategic mind complementing her analytical one, his protection allowing her intellect to flourish safely. The evening found them on the hill behind their house, sharing supper as they watched the village settle into peaceful twilight. Children's laughter drifted up from the market square where games continued despite the gathering darkness. "Any regrets?" Gareth asked, passing her bread still warm from their neighbor's oven. Lyanna considered the question, her gaze wandering over the community they'd helped nurture from a collection of frightened refugees into a thriving settlement. About refusing to be what others expected. Never. Even though it cost us everything we knew. It cost us everything we thought we wanted, she corrected. It gave us everything we needed. A message had arrived the previous week. News that Lord Edmund had lost his lands to the Crown after an investigation revealed the extent of his dealings with raiders. Justice, though delayed, had found its mark. Gareth reached for her hand, calloused fingers intertwining with hers. The merchant who visited today, he asked if we'd consider establishing a school, teaching other settlements what we've learned about sustainable trade, and I told him we'd discuss it. His eyes held the same pale intensity that had once marked him as dangerous, now softened by purpose. We've built something here worth sharing. Below them, lanterns began to flicker to life throughout the village, points of light that spoke of safety, prosperity, and hope. Then we'll share it, Lyanna said, watching their world glow against the gathering night. Some victories she'd learned were measured not in battles won, but in communities transformed.